It started like any other hearing, but it ended with a billionaire exposed and an entire empire crumbling. At first, Elon Musk walked in like he always does, untouchable, unbothered, above the law. But then Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood up, and with just one folder in her hand, she flipped the script. She revealed how Musk's AI company secretly tracked elderly veterans, struggling families, even children with disabilities, all without consent. The data wasn't helping people. It was ranking them, assigning scores, denying services, and selling their lives behind closed doors. For once, Musk wasn't the genius in the room. He was the villain. If you believe privacy is a right, not a privilege, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and join us as we uncover the truth the media won't show you. Because this is the fight for the soul of America, and it's far from over. 9:00 a.m., room 216, Rayburn House office building. It was a crisp morning in Washington, D.C. The sun shone through the cold, clean air, casting long shadows on the marble steps of the Capitol. But inside room 216, the warmth of daylight didn't reach. The temperature in that room wasn't dictated by weather. It was dictated by the storm that was about to break. The room was packed, but it wasn't loud. It was a strange, eerie kind of quiet, the kind you hear in a church before a funeral or a courtroom before the verdict. Journalists adjusted their cameras. Aides whispered nervously. Congressional staffers tightened their grips on leather portfolios, unsure of what they were about to witness. At the heart of the room, under the Great Seal of the United States, the banner read, "Oversight on Government Innovation." But everyone knew today was not about innovation. It was about accountability. It was about power. And more than that, it was about what happens when someone with everything believes he can get away with anything. And then she entered. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Dressed in a dark navy blazer, her hair pulled back into a neat low bun, she carried no notes, no phone, just a slim black folder and a look that silenced even the press gallery. She walked with the grace of someone raised in faith and the strength of someone forged in fire. She didn't look left or right. She didn't smile. She took her seat without a word. And the room changed. For years, Congress had become a place where tech billionaires strolled in and out like they owned the building. A few flashy presentations, a few clever metaphors about innovation, and they were gone, richer, more powerful, more dangerous than before. But this time, the room didn't belong to them. It belonged to her, and everyone could feel it. At 9:03 a.m., the doors opened again. The sound of heels and polished loafers echoed through the marble hallway just outside. Conversations dropped to whispers, then to silence. Reporters clicked record. Cameramen braced their shoulders. Elon Musk walked in. Clad in an all-black suit with a black shirt and tie, Hollywood meets Wall Street, he moved with the calculated slowness of a man who believed time belonged to him. His sunglasses remained on, despite the lack of sunlight. His jaw tight, lips pulled into a cocky half-smile. He nodded to no one. Not the chair, not the members of Congress, not the veterans sitting in the front row. He walked like a king into his court. Except today, the court had teeth. He took his seat, a few chairs across from Jasmine. She didn't look up. But she felt his presence, and he felt hers. The tension between them was electric, undeniable, the kind of weight you feel before a thunderstorm breaks when the sky darkens just enough to make people pause. The chair banged the gavel. This hearing will come to order. The words hung in the air like the opening line of a verdict. Musk leaned back casually, one arm over the chair, a smirk blooming. He'd faced hearings before, faced critics, lawsuits, even Twitter mobs. But he had never faced Jasmine Crockett. And he didn't yet realize she wasn't here to ask questions. She was here to tell the truth. Jasmine glanced to her left. Seated behind her was a small group of people, mostly in their 60s and 70s. Some wore veteran pins. Some held folders with photos inside. Some just sat, gripping their canes or clasping their hands tightly, their expressions grim. These were the forgotten. The ones who had lived through recessions, through wars, through elections that promised change and delivered the same. They had been told to trust the system, told to pay their taxes, told that their data was just statistics. And now, they were watching the man who had turned their trust into a business model. Jasmine turned to face the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Today's hearing is not about algorithms. It's not about AI models or smart innovation. She looked directly at Elon. It's about what happens when someone who builds rockets to Mars decides he doesn't have to answer to the people here on Earth. A hush. Elon raised an eyebrow, the smirk widening slightly. "This is going to be fun," he muttered. But Jasmine didn't smile. She clicked the small remote in her hand, and the screen behind her lit up. The words appeared, stark and cold. "Public service automation is not a right to surveillance." She took a step closer. "Mr. Musk, before we go any further, did you deploy facial recognition and voice monitoring AI tools in 38 counties across the United States without public consent?" The smirk faltered, just for a second. He leaned forward. "Congresswoman, innovation sometimes outpaces legislation." She clicked again. The screen changed. A video played. A woman, elderly, black, thin-framed, sat at a kitchen table in a worn-down home in Midland County, Texas. She opened a government-branded box. Inside, a small, smooth device. She pressed a button. A light blinked red. The screen read, "Listening." A soft, tinny voice came from the device. "Health check-in initiated. All room audio is now being recorded for quality purposes." The woman looked around, confused, alone, vulnerable. Her voice barely audible as she said, is it talking to me?" The video ended. The silence in the room was louder than any scream. Jasmine stood still. Then she turned to Musk. That woman thought she was getting free healthcare. Instead, she was turned into a live data stream. Her voice, her prayers, her solitude, all piped directly into your servers in California. Musk's jaw shifted. Those devices are meant to enhance care, optimize services, and streamline surveillance, Jasmine cut in. "Let's call it what it is. You didn't optimize. You violated." The chair cleared his throat, trying to bring order. But the order had already shifted. Because for the first time, Elon Musk wasn't in control of the narrative. He wasn't leading the story. He was the story. And Jasmine Crockett was just getting started. The silence after the video wasn't just tense. It was sacred. A kind of collective pause where even breathing seemed like it might break the spell. Reporters had stopped typing. Committee members sat frozen, unsure of what to say, how to follow up, how to exist in this new reality Jasmine had just unveiled. Only Elon Musk shifted. He adjusted his suit jacket slowly, deliberately, as if reminding everyone that he wasn't shaken, even if the slight twitch in his jaw betrayed him. Jasmine stood steady. "Mr. Musk," she said calmly, "are you aware that your subsidiary, Neuro or AI, was funded through a $5.2 billion federal innovation grant under the Infrastructure Enhancement and Digital Inclusion Act of 2023? Musk leaned into his microphone. "We're aware of our funding sources, yes." "Good," she replied, flipping open her folder for the first time. "Because it means you were also aware that those funds were earmarked for increasing broadband access in underserved communities, not for unsolicited surveillance technology disguised as elder care." Musk raised a brow. "I think you're misunderstanding the intention of our deployment." "No," Jasmine said firmly. "I think the public is finally understanding it perfectly." She clicked the remote again. This time, not a video, but a timeline. One slide, then another, then another. Deployment timeline, Neuro or AI, voice track devices. Jan 3, 2024, test in Galveston, TX Senior. Center Jan 15, 2024, expanded pilot in 5 Texas counties Feb 20, 2024, Northern Louisiana rollout March 10, 2024, Chicago, IL Urban Housing. Blocks, April 1, 2024, remote AI uplink established to Hawthorne, CA servers. Jasmine's voice rose, not in volume, but in certainty. This isn't innovation. This isn't healthcare. This isn't progress. This is surveillance. And it's happening without a single line of informed consent. Musk didn't flinch, but his team behind him did. Aides shifted nervously. One of them whispered toward his legal advisor, who scribbled something in haste. This technology didn't just listen, Jasmine continued. It learned. It cataloged voices, transcribed conversations, and triggered behavior scores that impacted everything from insurance access to eligibility for subsidized housing. Another slide. Behavioral Index System, BIS. Elderly clients assigned compliance scores. Low scores flagged for intervention by AI agents. Intervention included automated wellness checks, delayed utility aid, and in some cases, denied access to state programs. The audience gasped. Jasmine turned to face the crowd now. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked, scanning the room. "Our seniors were graded by artificial intelligence for how cooperative they were, how well they responded to devices they didn't ask for, and then quietly punished if they didn't conform." A woman in the front row, clutching a photo of her late husband, began to sob. Elon Musk cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, that's not an accurate representation of how the BIS was programmed. These scores were intended as internal metrics to help optimize." "Internal metrics?" Jasmine snapped. "For what? Optimizing how fast a grandmother in Texas loses her power because she didn't say yes loud enough to a machine she never agreed to receive?" There was no rebuttal. Musk paused, staring at the screen. Something flickered behind his eyes, not fear, but calculation. Jasmine's voice softened, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "This was never about caring for our people," she said. "This was about controlling them, and worst of all, you made them believe it was help." She clicked again. A new slide showed a Freedom of Information Act request response, obtained from the Department of Energy. Highlighted in yellow, "No formal consent protocol established for voice data collection under the Neuro or AI pilot program." The committee chair leaned forward. "Congresswoman, are you saying that Mr. Musk's company knowingly bypassed federal data privacy standards?" "I'm not saying it," Jasmine replied. "The Department of Energy is." The screen changed again. A brief video played, a town hall meeting in Shreveport, Louisiana. An elderly veteran named Harold Jenkins stood with a walker. "I didn't know I was being listened to," he said. "Not until my grandson showed me the blinking light and told me what it meant. I thought it was a blood pressure checker. I told it about my military trauma, my sleep problems. I thought I was safe." He looked at the camera, eyes wet. "I want to know who heard me. I want to know who sold my pain." The room was silent. Even Musk looked down. Jasmine's tone shifted now, not attacking, but resolute. "There's a reason this matters so much to me," she said, placing a hand over her chest. "Because my grandfather was a Korean War vet. He trusted this country, even when it didn't always earn that trust. And the idea that someone could take his voice, his story, and turn it into a commodity, disguised as care, that doesn't just enrage me, that breaks me." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. She stepped back from the microphone. "I yield, for now." But her eyes never left Elon Musk. And everyone knew the strike had just begun. The moment Jasmine yielded her time, the room exhaled, as if released from a stranglehold of truth. But Elon Musk did not exhale. He sat frozen, staring at the last frame of the video still glowing behind Jasmine, the tear-streaked face of Harold Jenkins, a veteran unknowingly betrayed by a device he trusted. The silence was so thick it was almost reverent. For once, no one reached for their phones. "But Musk?" He blinked, slowly, calculating. Then, like a man refusing to cede his kingdom, he leaned forward, voice low but assertive. "Let's be clear," he said, tone laced with condescension. "We did not deploy surveillance. We deployed services. Our goal was simple: streamline care, enhance safety, and ensure that government resources were being directed efficiently." He tapped the microphone gently. "That's called innovation. That's called responsibility." Jasmine, still seated, looked up, eyes unwavering. "That's called manipulation, Mr. Musk, and in your hands, it's weaponized." Before he could respond, the committee chair interjected. "The witness will refrain from political monologues. We're dealing with evidence now." But Jasmine didn't need another word. The room was already shifting against Musk. And just as the chairman adjusted his papers, a new face appeared on the projection screen. A heavily pixelated silhouette, electronically altered voice filtering through the speakers. This man, Jasmine said, was a senior engineer at Neuro AI. He designed part of the behavioral index system, and what you're about to hear, it's going to change how this country views Elon Musk's empire. The distorted voice came through. "I worked on the score algorithms," the whistleblower said. "At first, we were told it was for healthcare personalization, but when the code reviews came in, It wasn't just analyzing tone or phrasing, it was scoring emotional compliance. If someone showed signs of distrust, of confusion, or didn't interact enough with the device, they were flagged. Someone in the room gasped. The whistleblower continued. We weren't helping them, we were ranking them. And that score, it determined everything. The level of follow-up they received, if they got housing aid, if they were prioritized or removed. Removed. That word echoed in the room like a church bell in a thunderstorm. Removed from what? Asked a stunned congresswoman from the Midwest. The whistleblower paused. From access to services, from lists for medication assistance, from real physical benefits. And we didn't stop there. We sold those scores to local governments. The chair leaned back, hands folded tightly. Other representatives shifted in their seats, some in horror, some in denial, but none unaffected. We were running a social credit system, the voice confessed, and we built it under Elon Musk's orders. Musk stood suddenly, interrupting. This is outrageous, he thundered. This is nothing more than a disgruntled employee feeding you edited files. These are not facts. This is theater. But his voice cracked, and Jasmine stood. No, Mr. Musk, she said evenly. This is what happens when power goes unchecked. This is what happens when a billionaire decides that he, not the Constitution, not the courts, not the people, gets to define what freedom looks like. She clicked again. The screen changed. Document title, Client ID, 42, Cross-Analysis with Predictive Behavioral Audit Tag, Risk Score. 8.1, Restricted Eligibility, Automated Intervention Recommended. The name below it was clearly visible. Eleanor Whitley, age 82, widowed, retired teacher, Des Moines, Iowa. Jasmine turned to the audience. Do you know what Eleanor said during her risk-flagged conversation? She asked, lifting the transcript. She said, and I quote, "Sometimes I get lonely. I just talk to the little machine now. It's the only one that listens." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. And then she continued. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't defiant. She was human. And for that, she was scored a threat. A woman in the back stood up, visibly trembling. My mother was part of that pilot program in Iowa, she said, voice shaking. We thought it was a blessing. She stopped getting meal deliveries 2 months later. Nobody could explain why. Another voice joined from the right. My uncle lost his Medicaid renewal. They said he missed a digital check-in. He didn't even know he was on one. The gallery was no longer silent. The dam had broken. Musk stood frozen. Jasmine took one more step forward. You didn't just listen, Mr. Musk. You didn't just score. You stripped dignity from our elders, our sick, our poor, and you called it innovation. She clicked again. The screen turned black. Then white words appeared slowly. What good is progress if it forgets the people it's supposed to help? Congressman Leo Graham, 1969. The room stood still. And then Jasmine faced the committee. I propose we initiate a federal investigation under Title 18, Section 1030 of the U.S. Code, fraud and related activity in connection with computers, because this is not a privacy violation. It's a systemic abuse of power, scale, and silence. Elon Musk finally sat. But this time, he had nothing left to say. The room was still as Musk finally lowered himself back into his chair. But something had shifted, irreversibly. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was replaced by stillness. The smirk now wiped from his face like chalk on a rain-soaked board. Jasmine Crockett remained standing. She didn't need notes. She didn't need backup. All she needed was the truth, and now the truth had become unbearable. One of the Republican committee members cleared his throat and said, "With the chair's permission, I move that we call for a recess." Before the gavel could drop, Jasmine's voice cut through the air. "No," she said firmly. "There are no recesses when people are being watched in their homes." She walked slowly toward the center of the committee room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The cameras followed her now, not because she demanded it, but because they couldn't look away. "There was a time in this country," she began, "when our elderly were treated with reverence, when children with disabilities were lifted up, not tracked and sorted like products in a warehouse." She turned, looking at each member seated behind the long dais. Mr. Musk's systems didn't just violate privacy, They replaced empathy with efficiency, replaced community with control. From the side wall, a staffer rushed forward with a sealed envelope. Jasmine took it without hesitation. She opened it and read aloud. Confirmation received. The Department of Justice has formally acknowledged our referral. A preliminary investigation into fraud, biometric surveillance abuse, and unauthorized use of federal funds is now underway. A stunned silence, then murmurs. The empire had begun to collapse. Musk's legal team leaned in toward him, whispering rapidly. One aide stood and walked behind the bench, disappearing behind the chamber curtain. Jasmine's gaze never left Musk. "You came here with confidence," she said. "You came here thinking your charm and your checkbook would shield you, but it won't, not this time." A woman from the crowd stood. "My son is autistic," she said, her voice shaking, "and I begged our city council to approve those AI devices because I thought they'd help him communicate. But they didn't help. They watched. They rated him. And I had no idea until my son asked me why the robot voice said he wasn't good enough to play at the community center anymore." The woman wept. The entire room was silent, still. Jasmine walked over slowly and gently took the woman's hand. "We won't let them do this again," she whispered. Back at the bench, Musk's face tightened. A committee member from the South asked, "Mr. Musk, did your companies profit from data scored through this behavior system?" He didn't answer. The question was repeated. Still silence. Jasmine approached the front again. "I'll answer it," she said, "because the numbers don't lie." She held up a folder and clicked the next slide. 213.6 million. Sale of anonymized behavioral analytics to regional tech brokers between January 2024 and March 2025. $78.9 million. Internal bonus disbursements across NeuroOr AI's executive team correlated with scoring compliance. "This is not speculation. This is your signature," she said, pointing to the document on the screen. This wasn't about improving the world. It was about dominating it, quietly. And then, the final revelation. She held up a simple object, a black device the size of a deck of cards. "This is the Model 9-22A device," she said, "used in over 400,000 American homes. It contains a hidden subchip." Gasps rippled. She pressed a small button, and the screen changed again, this time to the chip's spec sheet. A blinking light appeared at the base of the diagram. "This chip doesn't just track voice data," Jasmine said. "It emits a constant Bluetooth signal connecting to nearby phones, even those not paired or authorized." One congressman stood in disbelief. "You mean it created a web, an invisible surveillance net?" Jasmine nodded. Not just for the user, but for anyone who walked within range. It was listening to their stories, their grief, their laughter, their faith. Musk's jaw moved slightly, as if to form a rebuttal, but none came. She stared him down. "You listened to us in our kitchens. You sold our pain to people who never cared, and now we're listening to you." The crowd stirred. A retired police captain stood. "My father was buried with one of those devices in his home," he said. "He thought it was a blood sugar monitor. But you were listening to his final conversations, weren't you?" Jasmine didn't speak. She let the stillness say it all. The gavel banged twice. "The hearing will continue uninterrupted," the chair announced. "This is no longer about oversight. This is about justice." The world outside the hearing chamber had changed. Breaking news banners exploded across television screens. Musk surveillance empire under criminal investigation. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calls for indictments. Social credit scores in America. Hidden truth exposed. Hashtags exploded across social media. Face scan gate. Musk exposed. Crockett for truth. Jasmine leaned into the microphone one last time. History will remember this day, not because one man fell, but because a nation rose. And outside, crowds began to form. Old veterans, mothers of disabled children, church pastors, working-class Americans. They came not for a protest, but for a promise that someone, finally, had spoken the truth. And her name was Jasmine Crockett. Outside the hearing room, the chaos was only just beginning. Satellite trucks lined the curb. Protesters and supporters were held back by barricades as chants for accountability rose like a tide. Dozens of microphones were pointed toward the doors of room 216, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. But inside, the real battle still raged. Chairman Green cleared his throat. This committee will now hear final statements before the formal adjournment. The cameras were locked on Jasmine Crockett. But Jasmine didn't rise right away. She turned slowly and faced the people behind her, not the committee, not the press, but the crowd of ordinary Americans who had filled the back rows. Their eyes were tired, some red-rimmed with tears, others burning with fury, with disbelief, with something deeper, betrayal. Then she spoke. When I was elected to this office, I promised I would fight for people who no longer had a voice in these rooms, she said. But today, I didn't speak for them. They spoke through every tear, every photo, every story of someone who trusted the system and got recorded, scored, and sold. She paused. America was not built on silence. It was built on truth, and truth is what we brought into this room today. Musk stirred, eyes hollow now. The cocky brilliance had faded. The empire he built on dominance, data, and denial was unraveling in real time. Jasmine turned to him. You asked this country to trust you. You said you were building a better future, but your progress came at a price, our dignity. She stepped toward the bench. You didn't ask permission because you didn't think you needed to, but let me be very clear. No one, not even the richest man in the world, is above the rights of everyday Americans. And then she said the words that would echo across every media outlet for days. You didn't just breach data laws, Mr. Musk. You breached the human contract. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Even the chair's gavel sat untouched. Then, unexpectedly, Jasmine lifted something from her pocket. A small cross. Simple. Worn. This belonged to a woman named Evelyn, she said, 89 years old. She was one of the first recipients of your AI device. She thought it would help her connect to her grandchildren. Instead, it became a machine that recorded her most private prayers. She held it up. This isn't about left or right. This isn't about Silicon Valley or Washington. This is about the soul of our country, and whether we are willing to let it be sold off, one data point at a time. She walked to the bench, laid the cross down, and stepped back. A tear rolled down a Congresswoman's cheek. Another covered his face with his hand. Then the chair spoke. We now open the floor to the witness for final comments. All eyes turned to Elon Musk. He slowly stood, but not with confidence. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the microphone. I was trying to prevent chaos, he began. I wanted to build systems that worked, that filled in the gaps, that saw what the government never did. His voice was quieter now. But in trying to fix things, I broke something I didn't understand. He looked around the room. The lives of the people I promised to help. I thought I was ahead of the curve. But now I see I was ahead of humanity. And that's a mistake no machine can repair. He sat back down. The silence was unbearable. And then Jasmine stood again, one last time. I don't hate you, Mr. Musk, she said, but I will not let you pretend this was harmless. She looked around the room, eyes glistening. To every senior watching from home, every family that trusted those devices, every child who was judged by a machine before he had a chance to be seen by a teacher, we see you now, and we will not forget. The gavel came down. This hearing is adjourned. Outside, the crowd had grown. Candles were being lit, posters held high, veterans saluted, mothers cried, ministers stood with hands clasped in prayer. The words, "We are not data," flashed on a digital billboard across the street. As Jasmine exited through the Capitol doors, a child held up a sign. Thank you for defending Grandma. She walked past them without speaking, but nodded. The nation had watched, and the nation would remember. And now, if you believe in privacy, in truth, and in protecting the dignity of every American, like, subscribe, and share this story. Because this wasn't just a hearing. It was a warning. And now it's our move.